The LA Kings hit the road for a big test after dumping the Ducks over the weekend. We've got a recap, a preview, and more on this edition of Locked On LA King.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We would love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Use Sleeper's terms of use for details. Busy show today. We've got a win over the Ducks to recap, a preview of tonight's big game against the Edmonton Oilers to start a big 3-game road trip. And we also have 3 days of action since our last show to kind of give you where the Kings are in the playoff picture after games on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But we need to update you on some injury news since our last show. The Kings have moved forward Victor Arvidsson from injured reserve to long-term injured reserve. The move is not a surprise. Arvidsson was expected to miss multiple weeks with that unknown injury he suffered in his first home shift against the Blue Jackets on Tuesday. Arvidsson will now miss a minimum of 10 NHL games and 24 calendar days. For reference, the Kings have 26 games and 53 calendar days left in the regular season. And I've said it, unless they absolutely need to have him, and of course, if he's available, the Kings should not play Victor Arvidsson for the rest of the regular season. Unless they're battling for their playoff lives and they need him, go ahead and hold him out for the rest of the regular season for 2 reasons. Number one, get him as healthy as possible, rest him up for the most important time of the season, the playoffs. And number 2, with Arvidsson on LTIR, it gives the Kings some salary cap flexibility to try and upgrade the roster. Before the trade deadline on March the 8th, Kings right now have just over $3.3 million in available cap space by placing Arvidsson on LTIR, that according to CapFriendly.com. Also, unfortunately, Kings defenseman Mikey Anderson is now out injured, and they're calling his injury a week-to-week injury as well. Upper body injury. Got hurt in the game against Nashville in the third period. I honestly didn't see it, didn't notice it until we found out he wasn't going to play against the Anaheim Ducks. So that's obviously another blow. The Kings are taking some hits right now as far as injuries go late in the season, which isn't great. And also, not to be forgotten, Carl Grundstrom's out on long-term injured reserve as well. As for the game against the Ducks, checking the lineup, we did have a few changes. Now, the top 2 lines would remain the same: Kopitar, Kempe, Laferriere, Danault, Fiala, and more. The third line, though, would be a bit different. Arthur Kaliyev was moved up from the 4th line to the 3rd line to play on a wing, while Blake Lizotte was moved off a wing position and back down to the 4th line to center that line where he's much more familiar. Jarrett Anderson-Dolan was in the lineup. Alex Turcotte out of the lineup, with Lizotte moving back to center that 3rd line, and Trevor Lewis back in on the 4th line as well. Obviously, the big change, though, defensively with the injury to Mikey Anderson, we were forced to see something that many people had been wanting to see for a while, and that was Brandt Clarke and Jordan Spence in the lineup at the same time. Vladislav Gavrikov would be moved up from the second pairing to the top pairing with Drew Doughty, replacing Mikey Anderson. Brandt Clarke would play on his offside on the left side with Matt Roy on the second pairing. And on the third pairing, a pairing we've seen before, Andreas Englund with Jordan Spence. And a little surprise for me to see Jim Hiller go back to David Riddick in net. I thought Riddick had a poor game against Nashville. Cam Talbot has looked good in his last 2 starts, both wins. So I thought he would go with Talbot against the Ducks, but not the case, returning to David Riddick in net. As for the game against the Ducks, Anaheim would get the first goal of the game on the first power play of the game, but LA would respond with a power play goal of its own. Kevin Fiala getting his 16th of the year, Adrian Kempe and Drew Doughty with the assists, and we were tied at 1-1 after 1 period. Second period, Kings would get another power play, but the Ducks would score shorthanded to reclaim a 2-1 lead. Kings, though, respond with another power play goal, not the same one they allowed the shorthanded goal on, another power play opportunity. Drew Doughty with a point shot, getting his 13th of the season. Adrian Kempe and Kevin Fiala with the helpers, and we were tied at 2-2 after 2 periods. No scoring in the third period or overtime, so the game would go to a shootout where the Kings have not been good this year, but P.L. Dubois and Trevor Moore score on the first 2 shootout attempts for LA. David Riddick would stop the first and third shooters for Anaheim, and the Kings would skate off with a 3-2 win over the Ducks, their 8th straight win in the Freeway Series, which is nice. David Riddick finished with 22 saves in the victory. As for the game stats in this one, Kings get the 3-2 win. They had 50 shots on goal compared to the Ducks 24. Those 50 shots on goal are a season high for the Kings. As far as the special teams, Kings were 2 for 4 on the power play, although they did allow a shorthanded goal. Ducks 1 for 2 on the power play. Face-offs heavily favor the Kings. Good to see that. 38-18. Block shots favored LA 15-13, and hits even favored LA 21-20. As for the pluses and minuses in this one, we'll start with the pluses for LA. Obviously, find a way to get 2 points in a game that wasn't their best performance of the year. At this time of the season, though, it's about getting points when you're fighting for a playoff spot or trying to stay in a good playoff position. So even when you're not playing your best games, need to get those 2 points. The Kings did that against the Ducks. Obviously, nice to see the power play getting a pair of goals. The Kings were much better in the faceoff circle and did a better job staying out of the box, something they haven't been great at recently, or they needed to do a better job at, and they did that in this game. The Kings were better in net, and we'll talk about more about that in a second. I thought Pierre-Luc Dubois had another strong game, drew another penalty, which led to the Drew Doughty power play goal. He's done a great job at drawing penalties and being engaged in games more, and a shootout win. Going into that game against the Ducks, the Kings were 1-5 in games that went to a shootout this season, so good to see them get some success in a game that has to go to a shootout. There were some minuses for the Kings. Way too many odd man rushes against the Ducks, and frankly, if they had played a better opponent, that this game may have not even gone in past regulation. They may have lost this game in regulation. Probably not a surprise, but I didn't think there was some very good chemistry between Drew Doughty and Vladislav Gavrikov. I don't know how many consecutive games Drew and Mikey have played together, but it's been a lot, and they've played together often, so I think that's to be expected. But Gavrikov, I thought, looked a little robotic out there at times. That kind of chemistry will only come as they play together, and hopefully, frankly, they don't play together that much because we want Mike Anderson to be back soon. But that's something that needs work. Brandt Clarke, I was playing on his offside, but I thought he had a pretty poor game defensively with some of his decisions. There were 2 times where he either misplayed a play or took a risk when he didn't need to that led to odd man rushes. One was a 2-on-1, one was a 3-on-1. And fortunately, the Ducks did not convert on either of those chances. A better team might, and that could have led to the result being different. So not a great game for Brandt Clarke. We know that as a rookie, he's going to have to learn to adjust to his game defensively in the NHL. And frankly, offensively, he hasn't been quite as good as I thought he would be. He did have a nice wraparound chance against the Ducks for a scoring chance. But other than that breakaway goal against the Bruins for his first NHL goal, he just hasn't provided the offensive spark I thought we would see. I know he's been a bit in and out of the lineup. I don't want to be too hard on him, but I've been a little bit underwhelmed with Brandt Clarke as far as what he would provide offensively so far to me. The Kings had several moments in this game where they just kind of lost the puck. I don't know if the Kings had bad ice in this one, and maybe I just noticed it more as a Kings fan than watching how that was working out for the Ducks. But there was no NBA game earlier in the day. No Clippers, no Lakers, so you can't blame that on this one. But the ice, the Kings just had some times where the puck just didn't stay on their stick, and I don't know if that was the ice or something else. And the Kings don't have a goal 5-on-5 in their last 2 games. They've got 3 power play goals, and that's been the offense so far for the Kings the last 2 games. That's going to be better 5-on-5 going forward. 3 stars of the game in this one. I went with David Riddick for the 3rd star. It was good to see him have a solid game and bouncing back from a subpar performance against Nashville. He didn't have to, but he got the job done. And again, just coming off that last game, I thought it was important for him to get back on track. Number 2 star for me is going to be Kevin Fiala. 3rd straight game with a goal for Fiala in this one, and also gets his 7th power play goal of the season. He's tied with Andrei Kopitar for the team lead. And my number 1 star, I'm going to go with Drew Doughty. Great job on the Fiala goal of holding it into the zone. and then had the power play goal that tied it up at 2-2. Point shot. I'd like to see him shoot that more, to be honest with you. But his typical logging of the big minutes, 27 minutes, 34 seconds of ice time for Drew Doughty. So Drew gets my number one star of the game. I will give an honorable mention to Matt Roy, a career high 10 shots on goal in this game, and also logged 24 minutes and 34 seconds of ice time in this one. So Matt Roy was very active with getting shots on goal. All right, up next, we've got a preview of tonight's game against the Edmonton Oilers. Next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Camino Consulting. How would you like to get to know someone better in an hour than you would in an entire year? Understanding one another better prevents small misunderstandings from becoming big ongoing fights. After providing more than 20 years of service to small and mid-sized businesses, helping management groups navigate conflicts and onboarding new employees, Camino is offering a digital seminar for families and couples. Did your Valentine's gift of tickets to the game not go over as well as you'd hope? Well, get the Couples and Family Online Seminar for 25% off for the rest of the month of February using the discount code Locked On. Again, that is discount code Locked On for 25% off for the rest of the month at CaminoConsulting.ca. That's CAMINO consulting.ca. And mention Locked On when reaching out for a business seminar and receive the first 5 profiles free. LA Kings are back in action tonight to start a big 3-game road trip. It begins in Edmonton against the rival Oilers. Kings will also face the Flames in Calgary tomorrow and the Canucks, the top team in the Pacific Division, in Vancouver on Thursday. But let's focus, obviously, on tonight's game against Edmonton. Kings come in with a record of 29, 17, and 10, 4th place in the Pacific Division, 7th place in the Western Conference, and 14th overall in the NHL with 68 points. Kings are coming off that 2-1 shootout win over the Ducks on Saturday. The Oilers are 33, 20, and 2, 3rd place in the Pacific Division, 6th in the Western Conference, and 13th in the NHL. They also have 68 points. Like the Kings, they are 1 spot up, though, on LA in the division, in the conference, and in the league. Edmonton is 17, 8, and 2 at home, and they are coming off a 6-3 loss on home ice to the Flames this past Saturday in a rivalry matchup. Oilers are riding a 3-game losing streak and are 3-1 since their last meeting against LA. That was a 4-0 Kings shutout in Los Angeles on February the 10th. Kings are 18th in the NHL in goals scored per game at 3.07. They are 3rd in the NHL in goals allowed per game at 2.63. Oilers are 5th in the NHL in goals scored per game at 3.55. 14th in the league in goals allowed per game at 3.02. So it is the Kings defense against the Oilers offense tonight. And if you've been paying attention, you know the really big matchup will be the Kings penalty kill against the Oilers power play. LA number 1 in the NHL on the PK at 87.1%. Oilers 4th in the NHL on the power play at 27.3%. And of course, the Kings will not have Mikey Anderson on the penalty kill in the game tonight. As for the Kings power play, 16th in the NHL, 21.8%. The Oilers penalty kill, 16th at 79.5%. Individually, Kings are led in points by Adrian Kempe with 51 points, 19 goals, 32 assists. Those 32 assists already, by the way, a career high for Adrian Kempe. Trevor Moore leads the team in goals with 21, but only 1 goal in his last 12 games. Hopefully that shootout goal, though, for Trevor will get him going and get him back on track. They need him being the Trevor Moore we saw earlier in the season, here down late in the regular season and going into the playoffs. Edmonton, of course, led by Connor McDavid, 89 points, 21 goals, and 68 assists. The Oilers, actually, their leading goal scorer is Zach Hyman, who's having a career year with 37 goals. And then there's Leon Draisaitl, always a guy you got to keep your eye on, 28 goals and 71 points so far on the season for him. As for the 2 netminders, the Kings are apparently going with David Riddick again, record of 9-3-3, 2.21 goals against average, and a .917 save percentage with 1 shutout. That came in his last start against the Oilers, a 26 save performance. That was also his first shutout as an LA King. Oilers expected to go with their number one netminder, Stuart Skinner. He checks in with a 25-13-2 record, a 2.72 goals against average, and a 901 save percentage. This is the third of 4 meetings between the two teams this season. Kings lost to the Oilers in a shootout back in LA on December the 30th. That was a 3-2 final. The Kings then got that 4-0 shutout on home ice in the first game with Jim Hiller as head coach on February the 10th. This is the first game in Edmonton this season. There'll be another game against the Oilers on the road coming up in the regular season finale on March the 28th. Let's check the projected lineup for the LA Kings against the Edmonton Oilers. We will have the same forward lines as we did in the Anaheim game. Kopitar, Kempe, Laferriere on the top line, Deneau, Fiala, Moore on the second line, Dubois, Kaliev, Byfield the third line, Lizotte, Lewis, and Jarrett Anderson-Dolan on the fourth line. There are obviously changes defensively again because of the injury to Mikey Anderson. Brant Clark has drawn out of the lineup after that subpar game against the Ducks. The Kings have recalled Jacob Moverar from Ontario in the AHL, so he will be slotted on that second pairing with Matt Roy. Even though it says Mikey Anderson on the graphic there, if you're watching on YouTube, that will be Vladislav Gavrikov with Drew Doughty, obviously not Mikey Anderson. Again, Moverar and Roy on the second pairing, and Jordan Spence and Andreas Englund expected to be the third pairing. So again, Brant Clark out of the lineup. The Kings deciding to go with a more defensive-minded player in Jacob Moverar, who gives you nothing offensively, but he is a pretty solid defensive player. So with Mikey Anderson out, they decided to go a little bit more defensive against the Edmonton Oilers, and that is certainly understandable. And David Riddick, again, expected to be back in net, which means we will probably see Cam Talbot tomorrow in the game against Calgary. But obviously, if you've paid attention to the matchups against the Edmonton Oilers over the last few seasons, certainly in the playoffs as well, Mikey Anderson has been a key defender against Connor McDavid and has done a pretty decent job against probably the best player in the NHL. And when it's all said and done, probably one of the greatest players in NHL history. So that's not going to be the case tonight. It'll be very interesting to see what Jim Hiller decides to do, and maybe what the new head coach in Edmonton decides to do. Chris Knobloch, who the Oilers have played. It's interesting. Both teams have made coaching changes this season that are matching up tonight, even though both teams have faced each other in the playoffs over the last 2 years. But what is Chris Knobloch going to do to try and get Connor McDavid out there? What kind of matchups does he want, being the home team, getting the last line change? And what does Jim Hiller try to do to counteract that? Will we see, is it going to be Vladislav Gavrikov? Will it be Jacob Moverar? Who will be trying to match up? Probably, I think, if you ask Jim Hiller, it's going to be, and it always is, to be honest, a team defensive matchup against a guy like a Connor McDavid, plus Leon Draisaitl as well. Those are guys that you need to pay attention to, not just individually, but as an entire defensive unit when you're out there on the ice. So not having Mikey Anderson certainly is not great against this Edmonton Oilers team, but the Kings will have a test, and Jacob Moverar certainly will be a guy we'll keep an eye on tonight in the Kings lineup defensively. So why is tonight a big game, and where are the Kings in the playoff picture heading into tonight's game? We'll update you on that next here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. We are heading into the stretch run of the NHL season, and the Kings are hoping to make a playoff push. But regardless of where they end up in the standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL Networks. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Austin Matthews or Nathan McKinnon will record more or less based on Sleeper's projections for things like goals, assists, plus, minus, and more. You can also pick goalies and go with saves. And it's not just the NHL. You can play daily fantasy with the NBA as well. You want to win 100 times a bet on Sleeper, then you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me right, Kings fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks, and you could start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availabilities. LA Kings face the Edmonton Oilers tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. So let's check the standings in the Pacific Division and the Western Conference playoff race coming out of a busy weekend. The Edmonton Oilers are in third place in the Pacific Division with 68 points. The LA Kings are in fourth place in the Pacific Division, also with 68 points. So a win tonight for the Kings, whether it's regulation, shootout, overtime, whatever, and LA would take over third place in the Pacific Division from the Edmonton Oilers. Now, they would move 2 points up on Edmonton with 70 points. However, the Oilers do have one game in hand. That's why right now, even though the two teams are tied in points, that's why the Oilers currently have the tiebreaker. But again, Kings win tonight. They take over third place in the Pacific Division. Oilers win, and they will maintain that third spot in the Pacific. As for the wild card race, the Kings are still the number one wild card team in the Western Conference. Their lead over Nashville right now, though, is only 2 points. The Predators are coming on, helped out by that head-to-head win over the Kings this past week as well. So again, Nashville 66 points, 2 points behind the Kings, who have 68. Nashville has taken over that second wildcard spot in the Western Conference from the St. Louis Blues, who have faded of late. Blues check in with 62 points, so they have dropped out of a wildcard spot. The Minnesota Wild also have 62 points, and then you've got the Calgary Flames hanging around with 61 points as well. So big game for the Kings tonight, not only to try and maintain that number one wildcard spot, but also to, if they can, pass the Oilers in the Pacific Division standings. And the top three teams in the division obviously get an automatic playoff spot, and that's what the Kings would have would they win over the Oilers. Talked about the lead being only 2 points for the Kings in the wild card over Nashville. It also, though, should be pointed out, the Predators have played 3 more games than the Kings. Nashville, though, not playing tonight, but the Kings going into tonight's action, 3 games in hand on the Predators, so an advantage there as far as games played. Now, if the playoffs started today, Kings would be facing the Dallas Stars in the first round because they are the top team in the Central, although that's a very tight race as well. They're only 1 point up on Winnipeg. Now, if the Kings were to beat the Oilers, as I mentioned, they would be the number 3 seed in the Pacific Division, third place team in the Pacific, and that would match them up against the Vegas Golden Knights in the first round of the playoffs. But that is if the Kings could win tonight and, of course, maintain that spot for the rest of the way. Either way, the point is big game for the Kings tonight and a chance to move out of a wild card spot and into one of the top 3 spots in the Pacific Division. As for the Ontario Reign, I want to give you a quick rain report before we sign off. Kings, the Ontario Reign, the Kings AHL affiliate, went 2-0-1 over the past week since last Monday's show. Wednesday, they lost to the Abbotsford Canucks 2-1 in a shootout. Tyler Madden gets the lone goal in regulation, his 11th of the season. Eric Portillo took the tough luck loss, just allowed the 1 goal in regulation and overtime on 29 shots. Ended up losing, though, in the shootout as he allowed 2 of the 4 shooters he faced to score. The Kings would bounce back on Friday with a 2-1 overtime win over Coachella Valley. Samuel Fagemo gets his team-leading 24th goal of the season, and Jacob Moverar gets the overtime game winner. So hopefully the newly recalled LA Kings defenseman will have a little good mojo coming with him from LA, coming off that overtime game-winning goal for him. And also congrats to Aaron Dell. He gets his first win as a member of the Ontario Reign in his obviously best performance so far this season. He allowed 1 goal on 34 shots in that overtime win against the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And then on Saturday, the Kings picked up a 3-2 win over the San Diego Gulls. So the same night the Kings beat the Ducks, the Kings AHL affiliate beat the Ducks AHL affiliate. 3-2 was the final. Samuel Fagemo, 25th goal of the season, again leading the team. Martin Chromiak picked up his 12th, and Charles Udon, unassisted in the third period, comes up with the game-winning goal. So Ontario right now is in 6th place in the Pacific Division, which is in a playoff spot in the AHL. They have an overall record of 25-19-6 coming up this week for the Kings. 3 games. Tuesday, they'll host the San Jose Barracuda. Friday, they will be at home against the San Diego Gulls. And then Sunday, hosting the Abbotsford Canucks. All right, that's going to do it for you everydayers. Those of you that listen, watch Locked On LA Kings every day. Coming up on Tuesday's show, we'll have a full recap analysis of that Kings-Oilers game tonight, plus a preview of the Kings-Flames game coming up tomorrow night. Wednesday, we'll recap the Kings-Flames. Thursday, preview of the Kings-Canucks matchup. Again, the Kings' first matchup against the Pacific Division leaders this season and one of the top teams in the NHL. And then on Friday, we'll recap that Kings-Canucks game and have another Kings fan feedback show. That is your roadmap for the Locked On LA Kings show for the rest of the week. If you want to get in on one of the feedback shows, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, and you can get in your comments on what's going on with the LA Kings. And we always welcome your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section in each individual episode. We would love for you to stay interactive with the show on social media 24/7. We are on X, Twitter, and Instagram at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. And as always, go Kings, go.